Over to you.
Yes, it follows on very nicely from the previous speaker, actually. A lot of what you were saying, in different words, but it's similar to what I'm going to say here. So I might alter some in this time. Upon his acquittal for murder of which he is guilty, Austin Greenall heads straight back to the Aero Flying Club for a little flight, just to clear the mind, to stretch the muscles, despite being warned of the lateness of the hour. As he comes into land, he sees what he first believes to be shadows, but no shadows these, but ponies, wheeling and swerving beyond him as though driven in panic by the sound of his descent. The bloody things were everywhere. Still they thundered beneath him. He hadn't got enough speed to gain enough height for another turn onto a different line from the stampeding herd, and yet that is what his hands and feet were trying to do. And suddenly he had won. He felt relaxed. There seemed more light now. Everything was quite clear, and he could no longer see the ponies. Suddenly he knew what was happening. Watching from the car park, Priest saw it happened. He just kept going, right into the boundary fence. I couldn't believe it. What do you think? Asked the Earl. Suicide? I think it's mysterious and sad, said Pascoe. That's it. A sorrow and a mystery, just like life. This passage comes at the end of Reginald Hill's 1980 novel, A Killing Kindness. I've been studying the work of Hill as part of my recently completed PhD, which examines the relationship between detective fiction for the last 30 years, British detective fiction actually, and the Aristotelian, Newtonian and holistic scientific paradigms or models of the world. Hill's work is of particular relevance to my studies as it demonstrates the importance of combining all areas of human experience in the search for truth. I brought in there that it's British detective fiction because American detective fiction, there are areas like the work of Patricia Cornwall and Kathy Wright, which deal specifically with the scientific. And if you think of series like CSI on television, detective fiction type series, they do science is paramount. It all is solved by the science. British detective fiction, peculiarly, or European detective fiction, relies very little on modern scientific techniques. It's more the scientific mode of thought or the way the detective reasons, his powers of reasoning, that solve the case. The actual forensic science of the thing is not an issue and is not important. Going back to the first section, the quotation, mention of shadows. He first believed that what he saw was shadows. This shadow is quite interesting, especially after some of the papers that I listened to yesterday. The idea of a shadow line between this world and another world, between this type of consciousness and another type of consciousness. And these ponies that he's imagining he sees actually belong to a group of Romany people who come every year to this location to do a fair. And it's cross-culturalism again. It's the idea of the way the Romany people think, the way they see the world, the way they interpret things, crosses over with Austin Greenall's world as he flies in a mechanical, Newtonian-inspired plane over them. The worlds, they literally cross, him in his plane crosses the vision of these stampeding ponies, which actually left that site a week ago. So you also get the kind of time shift as well as a kind of cultural shift. And that destabilises him to such an extent that the plane crashes. We never really know why. DL says, was it suicide? There's no explanation as to whether it was. It's left quite open as to whether it was suicide or whether some other power brought about the justice that the British justice system that had just cleared him of murder couldn't actually produce. So the Newtonian worldview is one which regards the world as basically mechanistic, functioning like a giant clock. Newton regarded the world and its processes as functioning according to a small set of mathematical laws. Truth within the Newtonian paradigm is arrived at through the collection, collation, assessment of concrete evidence and data. Truth is found in state-of-the-art laboratories through the examination of such evidence by highly qualified and experienced scientists. This is not necessarily so in detective fiction of many of our best-loved writers of the genre, P.D. James, Ruth Rendell, Colin Dexter and Reginald Hill, to name but a few. Frequently for Hill, forensic science is only used as a verifier of a truth which is already known to the detectives, often through DL's little black imp, which troubles his digestive processes at times when psychic enlightenment is imminent. For Hill, the truth can be reached through a variety of means, including supernatural knowledge and gut instinct. Hill's work frequently, therefore, undermines the Newtonian paradigm by giving credence to types of experience lying well outside its realm of influence. Similarly, Hill's fiction accepts and normalises information available only through altered psychological states, such as dreams and extreme illness. Examples include Rose's experiences in a coma and her relationship with the Knicks in On Beulah Height, Hat Bowler's recurring nightmare in Good Morning Midnight, and the extensive narration of DL's near-death experiences in The Death of DL. By introducing such elements within a contemporary setting, elements which are unacceptable within the dominant Newtonian paradigm, Hill implies that strands of such knowledge systems form an important, if scientifically unexplainable, part of the 21st century world and should not be disregarded without due consideration. The Killing Kindness is particularly interesting because of the credence it attaches to what might be termed anti-scientific forms of knowledge, such as the psychic powers and practices of the Romany people. Arguably, A Killing Kindness goes as far as privileging psychic knowledge over Newtonian-inspired scientific knowledge. An important aspect of the emerging holistic paradigm, which links it to the Aristotelian paradigm, is the breaching of or non-recognition of boundaries. A Killing Kindness interrogates the boundaries between Newtonian-inspired mainstream accepted science and that which is marginalised as pseudoscience, psychiatry, astrology, palmistry and linguistics. A Killing Kindness presents, through the gypsy's belief in fate and cosmic justice, a teleological Aristotelian world where all will come right in the end, with or without man's agency. So I'll go on to discuss A Killing Kindness in a bit more detail. Killing Kindness opens with a séance at which the medium, Mrs. Rosetta Stanhope, is trying to contact the murdered Brenda Sowerby to try to establish who killed her. In Brenda's voice, Rosetta states that it was green, all over me, choking. These words, although misinterpreted at the time, are recognised at the end of the novel as giving the name of the killer. The demonstration of Rosetta's psychic ability is of paramount importance here, coming at the opening of the novel. It establishes straight away the value of psychic knowledge systems. It harks back to a pre-Newtonian world, where knowledge was all one, not divided and restrained within the man-made barriers of different disciplines, nor branded as reliable or unreliable, according to whether or not it could be verified by science. Brenda is the third victim of a murderer whom the local paper has dubbed the Choker. The first victim was Mary Dinwoodie, the second June McCarthy. All the victims were laid out neatly except for Brenda, whose body was found when it collided with the barge in the river. It is the time of the city's high fair. The gypsies associated with the fair have set up camp near the local airfield, where the Aero Flying Club is based. The Choker murders continue. Pauline Stanhope, Mrs. Stanhope's niece, is found strangled in the fortune-telling tent at the fairground by Sergeant Weald. The next victim, Andrea Valentine, is found in her own home. The strangulations are accompanied by phone calls quoting Shakespeare's play Hamlet to Sammy Locke of the local Evening Post, who thinks that they are not all the voice of the same person. Dr. Pottle of the Central Hospital Psychiatric Unit is called in to help draw up a profile of the killer. Linguists Drew Urquhart and Dickie Gladman from the local college take the tapes to analyse the voice pattern. The roles of Pottle, Urquhart and Gladman will be discussed in greater detail later. DL is convinced that the gypsy Dave Lee, a distant relative of Pauline Stanhope, is mixed up in it somewhere because there's too many connections for coincidence, although Pascoe is equally certain that he is not. DL orders Pascoe to carry out a search of the gypsy site. Finding Pascoe on the riverbank, talking to the young children, Mrs. Lee calls him a pervert and shoves him into the water. Struggling for air and to reach safety, Pascoe realises that he is experiencing exactly the same scene as that related by the dead Brenda during the séance which opens the novel. Pascoe's traumatic, near-death experience, as he comes close to drowning, causes a paradigm shift in the way he thinks. Reconsidering Brenda's psychic communication at the séance from the viewpoint of this new paradigm, Pascoe realises that what Brenda is actually saying, or was actually saying, was not, it was green, all over me, choking, but it was green all, over me, choking. This is extremely important because it shows that correct interpretation of facts and evidence is essential, whether it relates to Newtonian science or psychic revelation. Pascoe wonders how an English judge would react to the production of a dead witness by proxy in a murder trial. He realises that the legal system with its hard and vast laws is Newtonian-based, and therefore a judge, the arbiter of the law, would not accept as evidence anything from outside the Newtonian paradigm within which the law functions. This clash between the Newtonian-inspired legal system with its fixed laws and the intuition-inspired, more holistic mindset of the detective also causes problems for DL in Good Morning Midnight and Bones and Silence. It's not only within the work of Reginald Hill this comes up, other detective writers who I studied as part of my PhD all seem to show a similar kind of leaning towards this. In a box of keepsakes found in Mrs. Dinwoodie's home, there is a musical festival programme from the town of Linden in Germany. Following up this German connection, Pascoe discovers that Peter Dinwoodie had run off with Mary Greenhall while stationed there with the RAF. Mary Dinwoodie was in fact Austin Greenhall's first wife. Pascoe confronts Austin Greenhall at the Aero Flying Club. Greenhall admits the killings and relates the details to Pascoe, who writes them down as a statement. As Greenhall nears the completion of his statement, Pascoe is called away, leaving Weald to get the statement signed, which he fails to do. Greenhall is charged with just the murder of Mary Dinwoodie Greenhall, as the police feel they are most likely to get a conviction here. But the evidence is all circumstantial, and Greenhall is acquitted. Greenhall's unsigned confession, which he later retracts, is inadmissible as evidence. Pascoe apologises to Rosetta Stanhope for the trial all being for nothing, because her daughter's killer remained unpunished. But Rosetta sees the outcome completely differently, trusting in powers other than the law. Her mood is positive. Rosetta tells Pascoe, "Don't worry, it's all going to be all right. It will be taken care of. It will be as Pauline would have wanted it." Rosetta feels that justice will finally be done, if by other agencies than through a Newtonian court of law. Her belief proves correct when Greenhall crashes his plane, that's the first excerpt, as a result of sick, non-existent gypsy ponies on the runway. The Killing Kindness demonstrates that knowledge does not have to be justifiable through science to be valuable, naming the killer as it does at a séance in the very first sentence. In our Newtonian world, science is the dominant method of verifying the truth. The psychic power of the self-professed clairvoyant and medium, Rosetta Stanhope, is not a scientifically acceptable fact, and yet it provides the killer's name. DL may call Rosetta's psychic power crap, but had Brenda's words, spoken through Rosetta's mediumship, been understood correctly and given due consideration as evidence at the outset of the investigation, the killer would have been apprehended immediately and the other murders averted. The Austrian-born British philosopher of natural science and social science, Karl Popper, believed that the object of science is objective truth. For a theory or hypothesis to be truly scientific, it must be possible to prove that it is false, as well as to prove that it is true. According to Popper, therefore, fields of study such as astrology and psychiatry are pseudosciences because it is not possible to prove that their assertions are false. This is known as the falsification principle. In A Killing Kindness, the division between Newtonian science and such pseudosciences becomes blurred. This is a feature, as I mentioned earlier, the holistic paradigm, the newly emerging holistic paradigm, the blurring of boundaries. However, the Newtonian-inspired reasoning skill of psychiatrist Dr. Pottle at least points the detectives in the right direction. The linguists Drew Urquhart and Dickie Gladman obviously consider their discipline as a science which should be granted the respect it deserves. Their work requires the use of highly sophisticated, state-of-the-art, Newtonian-inspired scientific equipment in the form of a sonograph. This raises the status of linguistics, or tries to, and reinforces the impression that linguistics is a scientific discipline. However, mechanically analysing the frequency of different elements of a voice and having them displayed on a graph reveals nothing of the intentions of the speaker, nor of the actual meaning of the words. The results apparently produced by this highly scientific and mechanistic apparatus could have been disastrous to the investigation, as they further convince Urquhart and Gladman that there are 4 different speakers. these results are wrong. They are the recording of a single voice. This demonstrates clearly the dangers of the point Martha A. Turner makes in Mechanism and the Novel, her book, that we still act as though facts are found rather than constructed. Urquhart and Gladman have not found the correct answer, they have constructed an erroneous one. The science of linguistics, then, is depicted as being far less reliable than the medium's utterance while in a trance. Rosetta and Pauline Stanhope discuss how the casting of horoscopes and palmistry, usually considered as far removed from science, are in fact pretty scientific. The effect of trying to demonstrate the links between the overtly scientific and other forms of knowledge is threefold. Firstly, it serves to raise the status of non-empirical knowledge systems by establishing their close association with Newtonian science. Secondly, it serves to reintroduce non-empirical knowledge forms into the currently basically Newtonian worldview. Within the Aristotelian paradigm, all forms of knowledge were viewed equally, as equally valuable. Different knowledge systems each had something to offer to extend human understanding of the universe. Thirdly, therefore, in line with the inclusiveness championed by the holistic paradigm, it seeks to recombine different knowledge systems, allowing a more rounded, more complete picture of the world and the way it functions. In A Killing Kindness, the legendary psychic skills of the Romany people are portrayed as a kind of pseudoscience, being far less removed from science and more objective than one might imagine. Newtonian boundaries between hard science and pseudoscience become blurred, harking back to the pre-Newtonian Aristotelian age. Mrs. Stanhope says that palmistry that it's a craft, you learn it. Pauline Stanhope is not Romany and therefore has no psychic gift, as her Romany aunt does. She tells Pascoe, I'm a fully qualified horoscopist and a pretty fair palmist, but I've got no real psychic powers. Pauline got properly qualified in them so that she can act as a convincing palmist and read horoscopes with a practical, objective, near-scientific knowledge which her training has given her. However, she lacks the real psychic power, the real gift, which her aunt, a true psychic, possesses and which is to prove so important in all aspects of this case. Psychiatry is shown in A Killing Kindness as a discipline which crosses boundaries. It is portrayed as both a Newtonian-based science while simultaneously relying on the experience, prior knowledge, understanding and informed tuition of the practitioner. The prior knowledge and understanding and informed tuition are very important in Aristotelian thought. Aristotle regarded intuition as important as scientific knowledge. In fact, it's the foundation of it, or the precursor of it. Although DL refers to Dr. Pottle as that quack, DL felt that the detective team would be daft not to use any expert help we can get, and so requests assistance. DL's considering Pottle as a quack suggests that he does not regard Pottle as a true scientist, or psychiatry as a real science. On the other hand, DL's wishing to seek his expert help, in spite of this, suggests that he also appreciates the potential usefulness of forms of knowledge other than purely scientific. One of Pottle's strengths is that he can employ Newtonian science, and yet see its results from a wider, holistic angle as best suits the circumstances. Belying DL's claims of quackery, Pottle is actually a true Newtonian scientist, at least in the way which he investigates and assesses the 4 tape-recorded quotations from Hamlet. He has to make 2 basic assumptions before he can proceed. That the 4 murders were committed by the same killer, and that this killer had the same motive in each case. These form the 2 premises which underpin his profiling of the murderer. However, as Aristotle points out, the premises of demonstrated knowledge must be true, primary and immediate. Pottle is worried that his basic premises may not be true, because if they are not, neither will be his profile of the killer. These basic premises Aristotle talks about, Aristotle said must be arrived at through intuition. So you have to trust your intuition. For Aristotle, intuition provided an equally valid route to ascertaining the truth of scientific knowledge. Further, no other kind of thought except intuition is more accurate than scientific knowledge. That's in Aristotle's Posterior Analytics. Most importantly, as the fundamental premises from which scientific knowledge is reasoned cannot themselves be proved by reason. It will be intuition which apprehends the primary premises. If, therefore, it is the only other kind of true thinking except scientific knowledge, intuition will be the originative source of scientific knowledge. Therefore, according to the Aristotelian paradigm, Pottle must learn to trust his own instincts. However, the influence of the Newtonian paradigm, which does not trust intuition, is reducing Pottle's faith in his own gut instincts. Pottle is a psychiatrist. For him, a disadvantage of his discipline, becoming more scientific, more Newtonian, is that his Aristotelian belief in true intuition is weakened. Pottle's Newtonian science aims to be objective and dispassionate. This is illustrated by Pottle's desire for more tapes. He feels that the more I have, the better results I can hope for, even though this would mean there have been more killings. Perhaps this is an illustration of Wendy Wheeler's observation made in her 2006 publication, The Whole Creature, that scientists are not interested in the world, but in data. He's not interested in the tapes. He's only interested in the tapes, not in the characters in the world of a killing kindness. In this aspect of his work, Pottle operates only within the closed, confined barriers of his discipline. Pottle's success, however, is dependent on both Newtonian scientific evidence and Aristotelian intuition, combined in holistic interrelatedness. It is the influence of Aristotelian intuition which brings Pottle to an accurate, qualitative assessment of the personality of the killer. As Pascoe notes during Greenall's confession, Pottle had been right in that Greenall only felt guilty when he had killed to protect himself. Pottle is also correct in identifying marriage as the key to the case. Pottle's profile of the killer is also very accurate, if limited. He thinks that the culprit is male, older than 35, and murders out of compassion, all of which would accurately describe Greenall. The teleological world is a feature of the Aristotelian paradigm, in which all terrestrial change presumes a completely immaterial, unmoved mover, or pure form, or God, whose self-thinking sustains the universe. Although the Christian God is never mentioned in The Killing Kindness, both Greenall and Rosetta Stanhope believe in fate, predetermination, and a sense of purpose working within the universe. Greenall, for example, felt that he was merely an instrument of some benevolent and protective force. This view he could justify to himself through the ease with which his victims seemed to present themselves to him, and the luck by which he escaped apprehension for so long. He had a feeling that there was a plan, but it wasn't his. Referring to the murder of June McCarthy, while Greenall here says that there was no plan, he still thinks that it was fate, that she should be murdered. Although Greenall's belief that there is a purpose working in the universe is Aristotelian inspired, it is at odds with his distinctly Newtonian view of himself as a tool. The Killing Kindness represents an interrogation of how surviving elements of the Aristotelian paradigm, which viewed all types of human experience as knowledge, might affect our world today. Further, it demonstrates how these elements are not just relics of past paradigm from a bygone age, but form an integral part of the new holistic paradigm. A Killing Kindness exemplifies Martha A. Turner's observation that other worldviews than the purely scientific remain available to us. Not only this, but in Hill's work, these other worldviews often appear to be equally, if not more, reliable than the worldview which privileges science over all other forms of knowledge. A Killing Kindness presents the world in which, as Turner notes, referring to Pride and Prejudice, strange things happen. A world where the pre-Newtonian and the post-Newtonian meet. This integration of older forms of knowledge into a modern world is shown as beneficial. As Wheeler points out, science has in the past been too anxious to separate conceptual knowledge and the power of the intellect from experiential knowledge. Galileo and Descartes reduced the world to a mere object of technical and mathematical investigation. Wheeler goes on to point out that the traverse between experiential knowledge and conceptual knowledge is the most difficult thing for all of us, because it involves a movement between what are in our present culture illicit and licit forms of knowledge. Hill's work arguably seeks to facilitate the traverse of the gap between licit scientific knowledge and other illicit forms of knowledge. By elevating the state of illicit forms of knowledge, that's of those innate within the psyche of the Romany people, while simultaneously demonstrating the shortcomings of illicit forms of knowledge, such as Newtonian-inspired forensic science and the legal system, Hill puts the two on more equal footing. The Killing Kindness suggests that giving more equal weight and status to all diverse types of human knowledge and experience will benefit the 21st century world by increasing our understanding and appreciation of its processes and of the people who populate it. Perhaps then life could be far more positive and fulfilling experience than the sorrow and the mystery which Peter Pascoe felt it to be. Thank you.